In this video, I'm going to be comparing the original Watch Dogs to Watch Dogs 2 and comparing them on their stories, gameplay, open world, and presentation. I will use the categories on screen to award points to whichever game does said category better, and at the end we will have a grand total and we'll have determined which game is better. And real quick, before we get this video started, only 3% of you who watch my videos are subscribed. So if you're new here or like the content, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. It's free and you can always unsub later if you guys decide you hate my guts. Anyways, on with the video. The first thing I want to talk about, and is the biggest difference in both game stories, are the main protagonists. In Watch Dogs 1 we have Aiden Pierce, and in Watch Dogs 2 we have Marcus Holloway. These two characters are very different. Aiden Pierce is a darker, more ruthless and aggressive killer who wants revenge for what happened to his niece. And Marcus Holloway is a much lighter character who wants to loosen Bloom's grip on San Francisco after he was wrongfully profiled for a crime he didn't commit. It's pretty clear that Ubisoft intended for Marcus to be the polar opposite of Aiden. There was a pretty negative response when Watch Dogs 1 came out, so who can blame them? But I think Aiden Pierce is a fantastically well-made and developed character. Sure, his story is dark and some may label it as depressing, but I think it's extremely emotional and personal. Aiden isn't just trying to stop Bloom like Marcus. Aiden is out to avenge his niece and protect what's left of his family, and in this constant desperation to protect his sister and nephew, he goes down a dark path as he becomes a vigilante and a killer. His character sort of reminds me of Batman or even John Wick in a way. Aiden has a big heart and he cares for his family, and when someone goes after them, you better bet he's going after whoever is responsible. Aiden's arc was so well done, I think, and by the end of the story, he's a very fleshed out and well-developed character who needed a sequel. Now, as for Marcus, he is also just a really solid character. The difference, however, from Aiden is that Marcus doesn't really have any of the personal emotion or connection to the villains of the game, and there isn't much to make us, the audience, extremely invested in his character like we were for Aiden. Don't get me wrong, Marcus is a fun and lighthearted character and I enjoyed playing as him, but the level of development and emotion with this character is not as deep as Aiden, so I'm going to give this point to Watch Dogs 1. In terms of villains, I wasn't totally blown away by the villains of either games, and I think it's a bit of a weak point for the Watch Dogs series in general. Watch Dogs 2 had Dushan Nemec and Lenny, while Watch Dogs 1 had Damian Branks and Lucky Quinn. The villains from both games I think are pretty basic and boring, but once again, I think the antagonists from Watch Dogs 1 have a deeper and more personal connection to Aiden, especially since they often try to kill or kidnap his family. Both games are very similar combat-wise. They are both pretty much third-person cover shooters with that reticle dot aiming just like in GTA. Watch Dogs 2 does slightly have more weapons, but I think Watch Dogs gunplay is much better. There's a lot more recoil and weight to the guns you're shooting, and you can actually feel the impacts of each bullet. I feel like they dumbed it down a lot more in Watch Dogs 2 and made the gunplay feel a lot more mainstream and basic. In Watch Dogs 1, you actually had to control recoil and be more precise with crosshair placement, so combat goes to Watch Dogs 1. Stealth is a very similar deal. Both games are quite similar, and Watch Dogs 2 just has a few extra tools like the taser and drones. However, I still enjoy the stealth from Watch Dogs 1 more. I love the John Wick style stealth with the suppressed pistol and staff takedowns. The stealth just feels a lot more badass, and in Watch Dogs 2 it feels a little more childish and basic. I mean, come on man. Takedowns with a super powered yo-yo? Like, what? My next point is driving, and this is probably another big problem I just have with the Watch Dogs series in general. The driving in all the games just feels a bit off to me. In Watch Dogs 1, the driving feels very unresponsive and hard to control. I did appreciate all the cool options of cars you could buy, but I just overall thought the driving was very lacking. Not to mention you can't even shoot out of the car while driving, which is something that was added in Watch Dogs 2. The driving in Watch Dogs 2 is much more refined and responsive, so an easy point there. Next, let's talk about customization. There isn't a whole lot of customization in Watch Dogs 1. Really, the only thing you can customize is Aiden's outfit and a few paint jobs for your cars, and that's about it. Watch Dogs 2 added things like weapons and drone camos, along with allowing you to actually customize each individual piece of clothing for Marcus, so another easy point for Watch Dogs 2. Immersion is very important when it comes to open world games, and I think Watch Dogs 1 and Watch Dogs 2 nailed the atmosphere and immersion in both of their games. Chicago from Watch Dogs 1 matches the tone of the game with this dark and gritty city that suffers from lots of crime and corruption, while Watch Dogs 2 does the same, except San Francisco matches the light and fun tone of the story. Both worlds do a good job of making you feel a part of the world and making you feel like you're in a live city. Both games utilize things like car radios and news reports that line up with what's going on in the story, and there's a significant amount of pedestrians and other cars on the roads and sidewalks. These worlds are very evenly matched, but I felt more grounded and attached to Chicago from Watch Dogs 1. I think the random crime events were a lot of fun and added depth to the city, along with being able to hack things like bridges and traffic lights, and the city just really enhanced that vigilante feel. The side quests of Watch Dogs 1 are pretty poor. They are your typical filler Ubisoft side quests, and they have no story threads or subplots. It reminds me a lot of the side quests from Far Cry 4, where it's almost like these repetitive mini games you have to keep doing like it's a chore list. Watch Dogs 2 has some of these as well, but the few side missions that had stories connected to them were a lot of fun and usually entailed messing with people on an ATM or maybe hacking into their house and freaking them out. So a point for Watch Dogs 2. This brings us to our final category, presentation, and let's start by talking about soundtracks. This one is obviously completely opinion based, and it really depends on your preference and experiences with each game. I personally enjoy the music from Watch Dogs 1 more. It's a lot of instrumental music that really complements the tone and the darker, more aggressive feel. Watch Dogs 2 has a lot more hip-hop, upbeat music, which I didn't enjoy as much, and I can't even really recall any memorable moments or songs even from the soundtrack. So point for Watch Dogs 1. Next, we have to talk about graphics, and I understand why a lot of people have a problem with me comparing graphics, since obviously Watch Dogs 2 has an advantage, but it needs to be brought up, especially if any of you are trying to decide which game to buy, and graphics can be a big thing for a lot of people. Watch Dogs 2 is very clearly the better looking game. Lighting, textures, and keep in mind that Watch Dogs 1 actually released on the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation. The game by no means looks bad, in fact I think it still looks solid, but it can't compare to Watch Dogs 2, and there was also that whole mess with the E3 graphics not looking even close to the final product, and that's a big reason for Watch Dogs 1 being so hated, which I think is a little unfair. Don't let Ubisoft's stupid marketing tactics ruin the game for you. But yeah, the game looks fine, it's still serviceable in my opinion, but if you just want to play a better looking game, then that would be Watch Dogs 2. But now, for PC players who may be using a lower end PC and want a fun open world game to play, then Watch Dogs 1 is a great option. It runs much better than Watch Dogs 2 on PC, and you should be able to run it no problems. Watch Dogs 2 isn't very well optimized for PC, and if you don't have a somewhat decent one, you may struggle to run it at a good frame rate. So if you're looking for good performance, then go with Watch Dogs 1. This leaves us with a final score of Watch Dogs 1 7 and Watch Dogs 2 4, leaving Watch Dogs 1 as the better game. Obviously this video is based on my opinion, and if you disagree, you can feel free to argue respectfully down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful in any way, again, I would really appreciate it if you would drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And other than that, thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day, Assassins.